Hi everyone, I'm Mike and welcome to the Sunday Art Show. Every Sunday I post a video. This is either a painting tutorial, a real-time demo or a plein air adventure. I enjoy painting a range of subjects including animals, landscapes, people including portraits and the occasional still life. I also enjoy using quite a wide range of media including conventional acrylic, interactive acrylic, watercolour, ink tints and even marker pens, and sometimes I just combine all of these together. This week I'm going to create a surreal painting of belted Galloway cattle exploring a river. And then I've got some paint here kind of mixed up in this central well, which I'm just, from a previous painting. So I've got kind of a muddy brown there, but let's pick up a little bit of ultramarine blue and put that into the mix. Got my big round mop brush. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of do a tonal, so it's kind of a dirty grey I'm putting down here. It's not a particularly pretty colour. But I'm just going to put down kind of a tonal first wash. So there's my sky. Grabbing a bit more of the blue. And pull that up a little bit to put in the distant hills. Or the beginnings of some distant hills at least. And then a little bit more of the blue. I'll perhaps pick up a bit of yellow as well, so that we've got, it's basically green. And we'll start to scumble in a few trees. Pick up this little bead of colour I've got here as well. So my trees have gone from green to blue. Let's make them a bit more yellow over here on the right hand side. And then we'll even pop a little bit of the Alizarin Crimson in. So there's the beginnings of our kind of distant landscape. And then I'm just going to wash the brush out and pick up some near pure cadmium yellow and sweep that across the bottom of that foliage. And then a little touch of the alizarin and sweep that across the bottom of the patch of the yellow. Now for the water, we want to go grab some of the blue and mix that into the little bit of alizarin I had before. I'm going to whip that across pretty quick across the bottom of the painting there. Then I'm going to do the same again at a slight angle and then come up a little bit and do one more. Just wash the brush out and just dry it a little bit on some paper towel I've got to hand, and then I'm just going to do something similar. Well, I've almost got no paint now, so that's not, I went a little far there. Let's put a little bit of paint on the brush. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to switch to my smaller brush. I'm going to grab some of that ultramarine blue that I had before, but mixed with less water this time. A little bit of the Alizarin Crimson, a little bit of burnt umber in there, a little bit of neutral tint. And I'm going to use this to begin to mark out the silhouette of the main boat in the picture. And let's just indicate where the bow is roughly. Now I want the main part of the hull to come up above that distant shoreline, so I'm going to put that in there, and then in order for that to work excuse me, I'm going to have to extend the length of the hull so that things stay in reasonable proportion. So there's the end of the hull. Now obviously I'm getting some runs here, and that's okay because we're dealing with water, so I'll combine those into effects. So for example, this bead here, I can just put a few ripples in, for example, but we'll come back to that in a bit. Okay, so having done that, I'm now grabbing some neutral tint. I want to put another smaller boat here. Some indication of an outboard motor. Then I'm mixing that colour with some yellow, give me kind of an off green, and we'll put another little ship, another little boat here. Grab a bit of yellow. Make the stern a little lighter, back into the neutral tint. And there's the beginnings of an outboard motor on that one as well. Now back into my dark central colour. It's a bit more fluid, and I can get the shadow that's cast on the water by this little guy here, and then something similar for that one. There's not much of a reflection on this particular day, it's very overcast. But we can suggest there's perhaps a little bit there, certainly underneath the outboard motor. And that'll do to begin with. Now, going back to the main hull, grabbing my neutral tint, mixing that in with the blue, but a thicker mix this time. Now, I need to make this bit here very dark. And then while I've got that on my brush, I'll use that to put in a little bit of line work. But don't want to go too crazy. So a rough or very light indication of where the front of the boat is. The stern, and then there's some kind of cabin coming up here. And that'll do for the initial lines and washes. So I'm going to let that dry now. So I put this painting away for a couple of weeks because I wasn't quite sure of the direction I wanted to go in. And I think it's often a good idea, especially if you're doing something a little experimental like I am with this one, to just stop and reflect, and look at it now with fresh eyes. So my plan is to define this little boat a little better with an outline here and darken the reflection here. I'm going to leave this one completely untouched. The main boat I'm going to paint over and hide this line going through here. I'm going to work on the cabin. Even though I do really like the way the wash is working on the cabin, I feel it's more important to preserve the background wash. And then I am going to push things further into the surreal, put a belted galloway here, so head at this end but looking out to us, side view for the body. Have another one maybe coming out of the undergrowth here, and then another one in the shallows here. So it's going to be really weird. We'll see how it goes. So my first move is going to be to take some Alizarin Blue, keeping the paint fairly thick just for the moment, and I'm going to add to that a little bit of burnt umber. a little more. And then I'm going to, so at the moment it's really sort of, you know, sticky, almost honey-like. And I'm just going to spray that with water. So I want to put down a reasonably thick layer, but I want it to be somewhat translucent. So just kind of working my brush through that little bit of moisture I've included there. And so what I'm going to do is sweep from the stern of the boat up to just here, basically. And I'm going to go from here, and I'm going to try and roughly hit that mark. So we'll try and do that in a smooth sweep. I'm getting a little more dry brush there than I kind of wanted, but some of it's working out okay. So in particular, I want to kind of fill in this area so that that background shoreline isn't too visible. You can see it is showing through somewhat. I'm going to leave some of the speckles of white showing there. I want to fill in a little more back here though. And let's go back to a thicker mix. Let's get a bit more of the blue. A little bit of the burnt umber, less water this time. I'm just going to put that there. I don't mind if it shows through a little bit, but I don't want it to be too obvious. Okay, so that's all right. I'm fairly happy with that so far. Let's just tidy up this edge a bit, perhaps. Now, while that's on the brush, I've diluted it with, you know, quite a bit more water. And what I'm going to do is just use it to put a little bit of the inside of the left-hand side of this little dinghy here in shadow. And I'll also add a little blip of that on top of the little outboard motor that's there. And I'll make use of that line which is already present in the underlying wash, but I'll put it in blue, and then just a couple of quick marks to suggest that, you know, a little seat in there, and, you know, maybe some other stuff which is being put in there, just so that it appears that there's something in that little boat there. And then I'm just going to run a little outline across there as well. So I haven't got the line quite right, but I'm going to come back and enhance that later. So that for now that's okay. But what I can do is take some of the burnt umber, rather thicker mix than I just had. Just put a little bit of darkness down there where the boat is meeting the water. I think that's reasonably effective. Let's just give that a spritz with the water just to move things a little bit. Okay. Now, on reflection, that the blue I put in, it was a little too tight, and, you know, when it ran, it wasn't really helping the situation. So I'm going to lift off nearly all of that. And I think I'll come back in with a biro later if I decide to do any line work at all. We'll see. But I want to go back to the cabin now. Now, for the cabin, I'm going to take some of the burnt umber I've got, but I'm using a flat brush now as opposed to the round I was using earlier, mixing in a little bit of cadmium yellow, and let's see what that looks like when we put that on the cabin. Now here, if I get brush marks appearing or remaining in the application of paint, then I'm fairly happy with that, because it's going to help convey some kind of, you know, woody texture. And then again, I'll just add a little water to that mixture, and so I'll put down a lighter tone of that on the front of the cabin there. Next up, I've mixed up a little bit of the Alizarin Crimson, some of the Cobalt Blue, some of the Burnt Umber. That's what I've got here. And I've just added some Ultramarine Blue to that same mix. And I'm going to use this colour to put in a couple of windows. Just removing some of the paint from the brush and watering it down a little bit, so that the next one goes on just a touch lighter. So, you know, I'm not copying the exact design of this boat, but I can use it for inspiration. And, you know, especially for these surreal paintings, the whole point is that, you know, I'm creating my own little world here, you know, so there's no right or wrong as such, as long as I'm reasonably happy with the result. That same colour, but with more ultramarine blue in the mix, and switching to a small round brush. And we'll put in a few of the little windows, the little circular windows we've got here. And then I'm just looking around the painting to see if I can use that elsewhere. And again, I think I'm going to come back to this bit. Just put a line of dark shadow there, there, a little down the edge of that boat. And then also I could run some, I'm just going to make it more pure blue, but I'm just going to run a line along there as well, and perhaps a line there. And while I've got that blue on my brush, I'm going to start to add some of these little Galloway cows over here. So I've painted belted Galloways quite a lot over the years, and consequently I'm reasonably familiar with their anatomy. So I'm not using a particular reference here, but I'll put up just on screen briefly, you know, some of the other belted Galloway paintings that I've done, so you can kind of see, you know, where I'm getting my inspiration from. So this little animal is off in the distance a little bit, off on the distant shoreline, and walking towards us. So I'm putting in, you know, a little more than a silhouette. At the moment, and what I can do is just leave that guy like that. I'll come back in a minute with some acrylic, because I need to put the white stripe which is going around the midriff, but we'll, you know, as I say, we'll do that in a little bit. Right, so a lot more ultramarine blue on the brush, so I'm coming in here and also mixing it with that dark color that I had before. So a little bit of water on the brush, and now I want to put another animal, but actually in the shallows facing this way, and just a little bit closer. So again, it's going to be all about the silhouette in this painting, so, or in this painting of the animals. So being fairly careful again, but I'm going a little bit darker with this blue, as mentioned a moment ago. So here's the beginnings of the head of the animal. I think I can make that a little bigger. And then we'll have an ear coming out here to the right. Just fill in that notch I had in the silhouette there, because we don't need that. Make the ear a little bigger. And then we'll have the other ear kind of pointing up a little bit more. And then the chest of the animal is going to come down here, like this. And then we have the back. And here I can leave a gap in my silhouette to represent the position of that big white stripe that they have around their body. 4 legs here. I'm not going to separate those. We'll imagine that the front feet are together. I'll leave a gap, and then the silhouette of the hindquarters is going to help me kind of begin to create the cylindrical body, even though I haven't actually drawn in the stripe or painted in the stripe. Just adding a little bit more of that blue to my brush so that I've got enough to keep going here. Hindquarters kind of come up, and then there's like a little raised bit, and then the tail drops down. And then we can put the rear leg coming down here, and another rear leg out here. I don't know that that's perfect, but it's not too bad. So next, what I want to do is create the illusion that this animal's in the water. So what I'll do is I'm taking that blue colour and mixing it with some of the burnt umber I've got in that central well, but I'm adding a lot more water this time. So what we'll do, we'll see how well this works. Little gap, and then that didn't work very well at all. So I'm just going to spray that attempt at a reflection that I put in, and that's made the animal run a little bit, as in the paint running, not the animal itself running. But I'll lift off some of that. I don't mind a bit of the blue of the animal spreading. That's okay. That's going to add to the illusion. Let's try that again. Let's see if I can do a better job this time. Let's put the palette down actually. I don't think I've got the paper wet enough actually. That's probably the part of the problem. Let's take a flat synthetic and just wet the paper below the animal. There we go, that's a bit better. I think that'll work once it starts running, and when I add the acrylic in, I think that's going to be reasonably effective. And then for the final animal that I'm going to actually put on the main boat here, I've mixed in more burnt umber with the Ultramarine Blue. So I'm just going to make this one a little larger than the one I just put into the water. So again, it's very much about just trying to get that silhouette to be reasonably convincing. There we go. Now I've got a little rigger brush here, and I've just dipped that straight into a tube of titanium white interactive acrylic, and I'm going to use this to just put in a few little details on the main boat here, and I'll also use the acrylic in a moment to put a few other details on the cattle as well. So again, I'm not looking to replicate exactly the ship. It's simply trying to create something that's reasonably convincing within the world I've created. So for example, details of the rigging and the masts and so forth, they don't have to be exact, but it's just to help create an extra dimension to the illusion. So with that in mind, I'm not necessarily creating complete lines here. That's quite deliberate. It's just as if, you know, perhaps a bit of light is catching certain things on the top of the boat at this particular time. Now I don't have my acrylic palette within convenient reach, so I've just put a little more of that titanium white onto a bit of paper here, and as you can see, I'm just dragging a little flat brush through that. So again, I'm just going to add a little more of that white to the bow of the boat here. Just dry brushing it on. I think I've gone a bit heavy with that bit there, so we'll just kind of soften that and let it blend into the background a little. And equally, this line here could do with breaking up a touch. So a damp finger. So that's one of the advantages with the interactive acrylic. If that had been normal acrylic, you know, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Okay, so now we can add a little bit of a highlight onto this main animal. Well, I say the main animal, the dominant animal that's climbed up onto this boat. So same white brush, which is perhaps a little big for what I'm trying to do here. But that's worked reasonably well. And then I do need to switch to a smaller brush for the stripe on this distant guy. But before I do that, I've just cleaned my brush and it's still fairly damp. I'm just going to break up some of these some of the white lines I put down, they're a little, I don't know, they're not helping the situation, I don't think. So lifted off that one. I think essentially they're a little too bright. That's a bit better, I think. I've switched to a little round brush now, and I'm going to tackle this, the white stripe on this distant animal. So I just need a little bit of that peeking out from either side. It's not going to be hugely visible against the light background, but you know, it's just so that if you do look, it's there. And I might add a little Bira outline to help define that later. Now for this animal here, I've actually decided I'm just going to leave that one exactly as it is, which I know is really weird, but it's in keeping with the rest of the painting, and that I've got a missing part of this boat. This one's barely defined, so having a missing bit of the animal I think adds to the surreal nature of the piece. Now I'm thinking the blue of the boat is looking perhaps a little dark, so I'm just going to try and lift off some of that with a wet paper towel and just kind of just blend some of that. So here's a look at the finished painting, and the idea for this surreal painting came from, you know, basically the pandemic. Towns and villages are much quieter, so I just liked the idea of these belted Galloway cattle wandering down from their natural habitat of the high ground of Dartmoor and, you know, invading terrain that they don't normally occupy. Either way, this is definitely a contender for one of the weirdest paintings I've ever created, and so for that reason alone, you know, I've really enjoyed doing it. Hope you've enjoyed it as well. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I hope to see you next Sunday for the next episode of the Sunday Art Show. Thanks very much for watching.